Okay, so we've got short reviews for February 29th. Most of these are March 1st releases, and most of them are pretty good. Uh, I sort of, we're going to have one of these every week for March. There's too many records to go through. They might go beyond six selections each week, and I think there's too much to talk about. There's too many great things happening, and I want to make sure I have a tributary to talk about the stuff that I won't have enough time to really delve into very deeply. So we'll start with a band that I'd really like to have more material to talk about. It's been 5 years since I talked about their last record in 2019. Pelican are a Chicago area sort of post metal innovator who have always been influenced by post hardcore. And what we found with that last record was that post hardcore was a big focus on the way that they were communicating themselves. And I thought it was a great record. It was pretty solid. I had my criticisms at the time, and over time, this sort of around 2022, they added back their one of their original guitarists, rounding out the original lineup, and they reissued some of their records. And this duo of songs more or less brings the post-hardcore influences found on Nighttime Stories to the forefront, pushes away some of the post-metal, the sort of grainier, harder-edged side of the band away, and focuses on a little bit more of the stonier warmth of that sound. And what we get up is what I would consider a very lyrical style of post-hardcore, which is entirely, well, it is entirely instrumental, as is most of their work. For me, it's just 10 minutes of kind of a blissful look back into Pelican and what they're doing now, and I'm really interested in seeing what that next record is. I don't have that much more to say about it. It's just that these are instantly enjoyable pieces. They were memorable from the start. I spent hours listening to these two songs, just because they're just very different from whatever else I'm listening to right now. But it was very captivating on my part, something I really enjoyed, and I thought I'd pass that along. J'ai et un autre is a project from Dylan Desmond of Bellwitch, and it's not necessarily a Funeral Doom project so much as it is a dark ambient thing directed by synth, and we never really get more than a few layers of synth on this record. It's very much a soundtrack level device. It is a little bit choral and ethereal feeling, but it's mostly darker. There isn't a heavy pulse. There's no real beat to it. It is very much the keyboard and the man, and there's some bass interjections along the way. The more important thing here is that the feeling that it focuses on, which is generally introspection and surrealism, and the disembodiment of a person in the process of craft. So I think that this is a project where the person is looking for something in themselves. They're obviously reaching for something with this record, and I found it pretty interesting. I enjoy background music, and I felt like the one thing that this didn't really do very well was backgrounding. It was hard to push it back because it was often quite active with its modulation. It sort of had a cyclical movement to all of it from the start with the first three pieces or so, and I found I had to kind of focus on it, and it was kind of begging for my attention from the start, where I kind of wanted to push it off. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it depends on how you utilize this type of music. And I found it was overall pretty enjoyable. I'd like to hear just more variety of sounds. I think this was a sort of a hymnal fixation, I guess, but I think there's a lot more you can do with this style. So this is maybe a dip of the toes into this field, and maybe there'll be much more to see next time. Mare Tranquillitatis is the second full-length album from Etoile Pilante. This is a French space ambient black metal trio. And when I say space ambient or ambient, I don't really mean that. I mean this is more of a almost like an orchestral black metal kind of band. If you're a fan of And Oceans and Midnight Odyssey, you'll know what I mean. There's very much a keyboard forward or a synth forward style to this, and it has a lot of personality up front. It's very melodic, and more so, it is giving a very over the top atmospheric hum to everything, which is heavy on the what I would consider sci fi fantasy synth. And it creates a lot of depth to their compositions where they sort of overrule the actual guitar tone with these keyboard sounds, and in a nice way, which feels a little bit classic, but a little bit right now in a lot of ways. There is a lot more depth that arrives beyond the first couple of pieces, but the first two pieces here are about 20 minutes total, and they eat up a lot of that focus, I guess, that I was willing to give to this record. It was a little while before I actually cut into the second half and found that there was a lot of almost theremin-like effects used. That they push deeper into their sort of oeuvre here and use a big variety of sounds compared to their last record, where it feels even more impressive than I had expected. So this was a little bit of a surprise. I was expecting it to be just kind of a symphonic black metal record, but it's a little bit more than that. There's the only thing is I wish it was a little bit more tuneful. So take that as you will. I think Detachment is the third full-length album from Contravoid. This is, I guess, like an electro pop group. It's a dark wave group. It's hard to really sit down and exactly say what they are. For me, I would always have described this as EBM, like Front 242, that kind of thing. And it seems to be that's initially where a lot of the sort of baseline tone for this project came from. Of course, Gothic synth wave and things like that sort of also factor in too. But this if you're a fan of 90s electronic music, especially mid to late 90s, and where dance and pop and I guess rave music sort of touch upon those, there's references to a lot of those things in here, to the point where there's something a little bit late 80s about it, there's something a little bit early 90s about it, and then late 90s, and then there's sort of now too. So you can tell it's like we're getting a lifetime's worth of kind of electronic music feeding into what this fellow does. I really appreciate that because some of that lines up to my own taste in some of that stuff. It's not necessarily frontline assembly or whatever, but there are some pieces that kind of go there a little bit in terms of EBM. Big, polished production values, great sound, big beats. For me, this is pleasure listening. It's something that's just inherently nice to listen to, and it doesn't have that glossy, reverb-coated 80s feeling sheen that a lot of groups in this style do, and it feels like it's more direct and effective in conveying catchy songs quickly. So I was actually a huge fan of this. See what you think. It's probably not going to be for most people who check this stuff out on my page. If that's how it ends, never met you at all. Desolate Eternities is the third full-length album from old school style death metal band Vorus. This is from the folks who are behind Necrotum, Putrid, and Demoted. You'll find that most of their work is pretty much gory, horrified death metal. A lot of it comes from the classics and brutal death metal, and this is no exception. There's kind of an autopsy-esque feeling to all of their work, and this one is maybe a little bit more faster paced. It's got tightened rhythms, it's got more thrashing songs, and more brutality overall. I really like this record quite a bit more than some of their kind of like their finished death metal styled record from Necrotum from last month was pretty solid. I liked that record, but this one is maybe, it feels a little bit more deep underground. It feels kind of rotten and referential of old stuff in a way that it's kind of cool. I don't know if I'd pick it up every day and obsess over it, but if you're a fan of old school death metal that's brutal, thrashing, does kind of some crazy shit along the way, and kind of has this weird sense of rhythm, like most of their work does. I think this is a pretty cool prospect in terms of finding exactly what you like about their sort of niche that they're carving out. For me, this is one of their better projects, I would say, overall. I don't think any of them are bad, but this one developed maybe in the most interesting way so far. So I enjoyed it. There's some really big songs in here. I would suggest checking out the ones that I mentioned at the bottom of the review. I don't have any really deep thoughts about Death Like Dawn. This is a Polish black metal project, I think a solo project, and their first record was just okay back in 2010, 2020. It was hard times, and people were just cranking out average black metal records, and I think that was one of them, and it just didn't appeal to me. This record suggests that it's leaned into a little bit more of its epic side. It is a little bit more dissonant in some of its introductory riffs and phrases on most of the songs, and it extends the length of these songs more often. I found there was some guitar technique in here that reminded me of Inquisition, but we could, of course, go much deeper underground with all of that. I think the most pronounced thing about this record is its terrible production. It actually works for this band, but it obscures the guitar work too much. Otherwise, I think it helps that the keyboard tones that they use throughout are really well set into that noise, and it makes for a viably old feeling record. But I don't think that the guitar work is too overshadowed to really work with this I think self-produced sound. So it's very much an obfuscated thing. I eventually acclimated to it and enjoyed what I was listening to, so the scores are kind of surprisingly high here for me. Worth checking out if you're diehard into uh, checking out what Poland is doing in black metal right now, and seeing, I'm always there to check out what Putrid Cult is doing overall.